Reluctant Enemies, part of the Operational Combat Series by MMP, turn 19, Allied Commonwealth portion of turn 19, and having kept their forces free from disorganisation markers in the previous turn, thanks to some great interception by their air force down here, and a couple of very poor artillery rolls for the Vichy. This large contingent of Free French mixed with British forced their way across the river. These units here aren't out of supply because they can trace back onto that road and back round up into Damascus, but they can't get combat supply, although they could use internal stocks, I suppose, so they're still very useful. But this large force has now pushed in and is really threatening to force its way through this HQ and into Damascus. The Vichy now have to reorganise their defence, and the trouble that they have here is that their defence will now be in open ground. They're going to lose the benefit of the hills, except where the HQ is, and that's going to make them a lot easier to attack. The benefit that they've got is that it's the 8th of July and they only have to defend until the 12th, so they've got 2 turns to hold out. Losses on both sides. The French had to take a couple of battalion losses to force the issue. The Vichy lost their potent armour unit in defence, some artillery that they threw forward as a kind of sacrificial lamb in an attack, and some cavalry there. So Damascus is where is the hot spot where the action is. Still nothing happening over here. The artillery shot that this massed battery fired across the river missed anything, so it was hopeless. The last of the Commonwealth reinforcements have moved up to here and can throw their weight into one of these stacks for an attempt to push across the river, assuming the artillery can disorganise the defence, so they can have a last crack at Damour, or hope to have a last crack at Damour, perhaps in the last 2 turns, assuming that the Vichy artillery and air force doesn't simply disorganise the attackers. However, the Vichy have lost some of their aircraft. Like I say, they ran into a Hurricane in fighting form, Hurricane squadron in fighting form. Lost some bombers, had some reduced, so their air isn't as potent as it was, but they've still got 18 factors that they could put in with fighter cover, so it's still an attack worth making. There it is. It's getting going right down to the wire here, actually, because if the Commonwealth can take Damascus, they'll pretty much level the scores, I think. Turn 20 then in Reluctant Enemies, and the Vichy have won in the initiative, and that's coupled with going second in turn 19. That has given them 2 moves to reorganise their defence around south of Damascus, and had the Allies won the initiative coming into this turn, they could have attacked into some pretty weak areas, but those because a lot of these units haven't got a lot of movement. But the Vichy winning the initiative has just allowed them to strengthen exactly where they need to, pull their artillery back into areas that they like, and even create backstops down this road to stop any catastrophic breakouts, keep playing as if the game's ongoing. Yeah, I think the position for them looks pretty comfortable now. I mean, it's possible still, I guess, that the Allies take a hex of Damascus, and we'll see what they can do, but it's looking far less likely than it did when this breakout initially occurred. Elsewhere, everything's been static, not a lot going on, neither side having much opportunity to do anything. The Allies will shell over here again and throw their reinforcements in for probably an attack into Damour in the next couple of turns if they can get to it, but we're reaching the conclusion here, and Still, the action's going to be over here, I think, where the Commonwealth have to make some attempt to break this line and get into Damascus. End of turn 20, coming into the final turn 21, and the Commonwealth have forced their way down this road with a succession of good combat results. They are right on the edge of South Damascus. They had an exploitation move and attack with a big French stack here on the southern edge of Damascus, which attacked into there. There's just one unit left holding it, that 335. They're facing 3 French battalions, all strength 6. There's a 6-to-1 attack waiting to go off into South Damascus if the French Commonwealth, Free French and Commonwealth can get the initiative. Over on the coast, a big attack went into Damour from both these stacks. Huge attack went in with, that's something like 59 Allied factors or Commonwealth factors, but halved across the river it was only 29 or something, and the defenders had, even with the halving from the DG, 11.5. So it was a 2-to-1 attack. They got some surprise, and they ended up with taking a loss but causing 2 losses. So again, there's 2 defenders DG'd, still holding to more, but there's a massive attack waiting to go across the river and take it if the Allies can win the initiative. So if the Allies win the initiative right now, coming into the final turn, they've got a great shot at Damour, they've got a great shot at South Damascus. If they don't win the initiative, then a lot of this stuff will drift back up into Damascus, and it will become almost impossible to take. It'll be like a 1-to-1 attack or something by the time stuff has rolled back in to defend it, maybe not even that. So if the Vichy get to reinforce here, they probably hold on, and likewise over here, because they will lose the DG and they will be able to move units across into Damour. So let's just make a quick initiative roll. The Commonwealth are the white dice, the Vichy are the red dice, and we'll see. Actually, I've just thrown the dice on the carpet, so let's see. Oh, I've thrown it under the sofa. Even worse. Okay, so here we go. The initiative roll is a huge win for the Vichy, 11-9, and that's probably going to seal the game right there. Let's see what happens. So in the Vichy segment, the artillery and air managed to DG. Well, the air did nothing actually. This Air Force rolled a 2 and missed everything it aimed bombs at, but the artillery up here, only 6 strength, but it wasn't modified by any density or terrain. They managed to DG a big French stack there, and over on this side, this was a huge one here. That 12-point artillery lobbed some shells into this big attacking Commonwealth stack, and together with some reinforcements, they've probably managed to keep Damour safe. So it's bonsai time for the Commonwealth, just to see if they can mount any sort of attack at all. The final Commonwealth assaults then failed to take Damascus. A 4-to-1 attack went in against DG'd, disorganised opponents, but it wasn't enough. And there were a few casualties on either side, but Damascus held. However, over on the river line, huge surprise result for the Commonwealth. 6-column shift turned a 2-to-1 attack into something ridiculous, and they then rolled 10 or 11 on the combat table and stormed across the river, seizing Damour. So that's pretty much the final action of the game. They did have an exploit, some exploit with the troops in Damour, but there's really pretty much surrounded. They'd have to make attacks, and there's nothing worth points that they could attack into. So that was the end of the game. I'm just going to count the victory points up, but I've got a feeling that the Commonwealth have 5. That's my instinct. I'm just going to double check that. And having checked, indeed it is 5 VPs for the Commonwealth. 2 for Demore there, 1 for Sidon, that's 3, 1 for Meljayoun, 4, and 1 for the village, which is under this 433 here, 5. And the victory point determination table says victory points 5 or less, crushing Vichy victory. So the Vichy have won that convincingly. And that I don't really care about. It's been a really, really entertaining and interesting game to play through. And in these last couple of turns, it's felt like the Allies have been teetering on a breakthrough, but not just not quite made it in time. If they'd won the initiative coming into this last turn, I feel fairly confident that they would have taken South Damascus and possibly forged their way across into North Damascus, and that would have been a 4-point swing, and they'd have had 9 points for the draw. As it is, they didn't get the initiative and were held just short. If you look at the sort of casualty piles here, you can see fairly clearly who was winning on that front. This was just happened this turn, I think, most of those. So you can see that the Vichy casualties were mounting up and really coming across to this river line here. If you look at this coastal section with that river line breached and a huge force and with artillery backup poised here, there's very little standing between them and Beirut. This looks like a big stack, but actually it's got a air base in there and an aircraft and a cart and some supply and all kinds of anything other than combat units. The only combat units in there are a couple that had to retreat out of Demore. So really there's not much now between the Brits and Beirut, but it's the end of the game, and so the Vichy have done enough. Like I say, really enjoyable game of OCS. This, it's commonly suggested that this is like a starter introduction game for OCS. Personally, I don't quite buy that. I would think that a starter game should be considerably shorter. This is 21 turns long. It's been on my table 2 weeks now. 2 weeks isn't a starter game in my book. I'd rather pull, one of the old Enemy at the Gates or something off the shelf and play a 4 or 5 turn game, on a single map. There's plenty of those about in the OCS system without having to play, 21 turns and try and plan over that length of time in terms of supply and logistics and so on. So yeah, this is there's enough here to explore, I think, again. And although I've made a couple of failed starts in this game, getting through it all, it's really enjoyable, a really good contest. Yeah, hope to have this one out again, but for now it's time to shift on to something else. Probably not OCS, probably not even World War II. Let's see what I can find.